Welcome to Untamed Blossoms, the podcast where we celebrate the untamed journey of womanhood. Here, we tell the stories of incredible women who have embraced their authenticity, inspiring others to do the same.
From entrepreneurs to artists, activists to adventurers, we share triumphs, challenges, and the beauty of self-discovery. These are the stories of women blazing their own trails, breaking free, and blooming unapologetically.
Join us to connect, be inspired, and celebrate the power of women's stories. Together, let's rewrite the rules and embrace our wildness.
Welcome to Untamed Blossoms. I'm your host, Amanda Riley.
And I'm Christy Riley. Welcome to the show, everybody.
It's a rainy day, but it's warm.
It's nice.
And that's really all that matters.
Spring day.
Spring day.
Yeah. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
At least it's not cold enough that we need heat today.
And blankets.
Like sweatshirts.
Yeah. I will say my sinuses, though, are like,
yeah.
What is this pollen in the air?
You are a pretty allergy-ridden girl. Yeah.
It's
Doesn't
okay.
surprise me.
Just a lot of congestion and like the headache in your eyes, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Where you just want to close your eyes and take a nap.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You know, I'm glad I don't suffer from that, but I'm sorry that you and your brother definitely do.
it's totally fine. I just feel like, why make me allergic to everything outside? That's not very fair because I
Because you
love
love
being
being
outside.
outside.
That's horrible.
No.
Like every tree I'm allergic to.
Maybe you getting away from gluten will help your other allergies. Sometimes that inflammation can trigger other things. Maybe this would be a path to having less.
I think it's my path to having less sinuses.
Yeah.
But per my allergy testings, I do think I'm just so allergic to pollen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Not getting away
but I
from
think
that.
sinus wise, I think it's going to help a lot. The less of gluten and dairy. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see.
Easter weekend, y'all. We just
Yeah.
had Easter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy Ostera for those who celebrate.
Amen.
you
Yeah.
know?
Ours was an Easter celebration or a spring celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think spring celebration is good because, I know Dr. Mary, who we go to our book club with.
I shared that, by the way, what she
Yeah.
shared with us, and it was so great.
It was so beautiful. It's about just like,
We should read it.
okay.
We should read it.
I
I
have
have
it right
it
here.
Yeah, you have it? We should
Yeah.
read it because I loved it. I sent it to my girls because it summed up how I felt about Easter in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So she wrote, Easter, the rising within you. Easter isn't just about one resurrection long ago. It's about the paschal mystery alive in you, death, waiting, rebirth. We all go through it. Something in us has to die, an old story, and a role we've outgrown, a way of being that no longer fits. Then comes a stillness, the waiting, the silence that feels like nothing's happening, but something is happening. Then, without warning, you rise. Not who you were, someone new, wiser, softer, stronger. This is Easter, the reminder that transformation is not only possible, it's promised. Rebirth is not a myth, it's a reality. So today, honor the light rising within you. Let it guide you forward. You are not who you were, and that's the miracle.
Yeah. Love that.
I'm like, wow, that is a great way to allow many belief systems to understand the importance of rebirth.
Yeah.
And our earth does it every single year.
And we come from large families, and we have a lot of different religious beliefs and spirituality beliefs within our big family units,
Yeah.
and I think it's easy during the holidays to get triggered or caught up in that, or somebody doesn't want to participate, or this person doesn't celebrate Easter, or it's just Easter egg hunting. But to some religions it's not just that, right? It is actually practicing in somebody else's religion. That's the way they see it. But we get caught up in other a little bit, and it's easy to get upset about things. And I love that because it encompasses all of that, right?
Yeah.
And there's not one of us that doesn't touch. And it makes room for all the religions and all the different beliefs, and still being okay with this time of year and however you choose to celebrate it or not celebrate it. We always celebrate every equinox. So spring, summer, winter, fall. Like we like all of them. And that's really what we choose to celebrate in our household. But, it's a nice reminder of inclusivity, I think. It includes everybody. And I like that statement. So
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We have an awesome guest today. I'm so excited
I know.
to talk to her.
I know. We've been promising a meeting with her for a while now. We have a mutual friend that introduced us. She is a life coach here in Columbus.
Yep.
Doing some great work. It looks like she's dabbling in some artistry as well, some clay making and kind of broadening her horizons that way. And she claims to be a writer on her social media. So I'm sure we'll talk about all that.
Yep. Can't wait.
Yeah. Megan.gerber, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. We are so lucky that we got another person through Sarah. This person is a sweet angel. You guys should interview her. We were like, yes.
I love that. I'm so grateful. As soon as she told me that and I looked at your podcast page, I was like, yes, these are some of my people.
This is my tribe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and we love Sarah. We were just talking about that off camera.
Yep.
We adore her, all of us. So anybody that's a friend with Sarah, we know that we're going to love.
Totally.
Love that.
And so you met her through doing pottery, right?
Yes.
Correct?
Sarah and I were on an adventure of learning ceramics, throwing on the wheel at Columbus College of Art and Design, their community classes, which shout out to those, incredible experience. So it's a 10-week course every Saturday. And you just go and you get really humbled on the wheel because I don't know if you've ever tried to throw on a pottery wheel.
One time.
But you will be so humbled.
Yes.
And
yes.
But it's a really beautiful, like if you're open to that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful kind of meditative practice if you can lean into it. Teaches you a lot about yourself and also just like opens up that kind of source of creativity that sometimes we can get really blocked, especially as adults. So that has been a pretty significant thing for me, learning to throw.
And that's the first time you had dabbled in that?
I actually took a course at the Cultural Arts Center for 8 weeks before that. So just to give you perspective, like in that 8 weeks, I never had a finished product.
Wow.
So like,
wow.
I had to really adjust my expectations on what it meant to work with ceramics.
I threw one time.
Yeah.
It was a group thing that I bought with my kids for us to go do for a Christmas gift. We do experiences instead of too many gifts. And it was hysterical. And what was supposed to be, I was attempting a coffee mug, ended up being a small little thing that I just put rings in.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, that's as far as it's getting in the hour that we had to do it. So, and I'd never done it before. And I was like, this is progress.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just going to take the W.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you did that.
Yeah, we had a great time.
Cool.
Did you make anything really cool that you were like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm proud of this one?
Yeah. By the time we got through our CCAD class, I had probably like 12 pieces that, a professional ceramicist is going to look at and they probably wouldn't judge because they're usually pretty cool. But, I'm not trying to like sell them in a store.
Right.
But they are special to me just because, it shows my journey. And
I saw them on Instagram. They were good. I like them. You're welcome. I saw them.
Okay.
And I was impressed, especially the ones that flare out at the bottom. If anybody's ever done this, and then a hole is small at the bottom, at the top. I'm like,
not easy.
No. That's some talent right there. I was like, hey,
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I was impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll get there. My aunt is actually like a professional potter and
oh wow,
I really admire her. She lives in Mississippi, or else I wish I could just learn from her. She has a full studio and she does amazing stuff. So I'm really inspired by her.
Do you do any art prior to like this, or is this like do you dabble in mediums, or what is your process?
Yeah, I would call myself a writer, so I'm gonna throw that into the art world. I mostly just write poetry, and also I love to interview women and write their stories and just kind of like give it to them as a gift. And I've always been a creative person. Even as a kid, my grandma was a watercolor artist. And so I was always at her house and we were just making art and painting and making earrings. And so it's always been in me. And my mom's an interior designer.
Wow.
Yeah. So
The whole fam.
I have creative people in my genes, and I've always felt most alive when I've had a creative outlet.
So is it your mom's sister that's
It's actually not. It's my dad's sister.
That's interesting.
And it's my dad's mom who's the watercolorist.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that a word? Watercolorist? I don't know.
I think so.
Okay.
If not,
Water
it is now.
artist.
So
Well,
so take us back. Where did you grow up and what was your family dynamic like?
Yeah. I grew up in Southern Ohio, Appalachia, which I feel now like really proud of. I come from a really long line of strong Appalachian women. And kind of a passion of mine is talking a lot to my mom about those women and just kind of the ways that they impacted their community and their families and the resilience they had to have to get to where they are, and also for me to be where I am. So I just have a really deep gratitude for that. So yeah, I grew up in Chillicothe, Ohio's first and third capital, in case anyone didn't know.
In case anybody did not know, that is
Right?
absolutely true.
Exactly. We are on the map.
Yep.
A small town which I had a love-hate relationship with even as a kid. I always felt like drawn to move away, but I also was really shaped by that small community and supported. I have two of the most incredible parents anyone could ever have. I will tell you that. Sometimes I'm like, I feel like I should be cooler, even because of the parents I have. Like, they're that incredible. They're completely opposite. My dad and my grandpa before him owned their own businesses. They were entrepreneurs, and my dad's like very type A, responsible, but also like a really sensitive man. And he has 3 daughters. I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and was the best dad. And I think I have a lot of confidence as a woman because of that. And I never take that for granted.
Yeah.
He was never shy in showing his love for his daughters or for anyone actually. And he's the most generous person you'll ever meet. And my mom is this like wild, untamed, just like free-spirited woman who just like lights up every room she enters and loves really big. Yeah, and she's wonderful. And she's my best friend, and I'm really grateful for both of them. So I had a childhood. I also like feel like it's significant to mention that like I was the last generation to not grow up with social media or like even really a cell phone until I was like almost graduating high school in 2006. Such a gift. So I feel like I had a childhood of like, I would just ride my bike to my friends' houses all the time. It was just a different world.
Right.
And my life has always been so fueled with relationships and friendships and connection. And that's just how I'm wired. And I feel so grateful that I got to grow up in a time that fostered that and imagination and play. And I'm not saying that, I think parents these days are fighting really hard for their kids to grow up in spaces like that. But it's like my parents didn't have to fight for that. That was just kind of like a given.
It's increasingly difficult.
Exactly.
Especially as they get older and everybody has it, mom and dad. Why can't I have it? Why can't I be on Snapchat? It's literally how they socialize now. It's part of their ingrained socialization.
Yes.
Is to be on these platforms.
Yeah.
And in some ways you are saving them, and in other ways you're alienating them because they're out and everybody else is in. And that's how I'm sure how it feels. And
for sure,
that's the dynamic that we get presented with is like, why would you keep me out of that?
Yes.
Right. And like, you're killing me slowly.
For sure.
But I think that more and more people are becoming more privy to the fact that this is not great for them to be in these platforms all the time and
for sure
pulling phones out of schools and all these things that keep them distracted constantly. Hopefully we've pinged to one extreme, and I'm hoping we get back to maybe somewhere in the middle.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, didn't mean to derail you.
No, I completely agree.
It is
with
important to say. Like, I think that does help.
Yeah, feels like really significant. So, also I grew up behind two sisters who were extremely musically talented and like kind of performing people. And I was just like a really quiet kid who usually just sat in the corner. I understand now it's because I'm an empath and I'm like navigating all the energy in the space and like reading between the lines of what people are actually saying, which I think I've acknowledged now is my superpower and is what has brought me here in life. But that was like an interesting thing to be really different from my sisters and kind of that expectation because I am not musically talented. They both have music degrees and whatever. So that was, I say that just because I have always felt in every room that I walk in as like, I'm here kind of like as an observer and a person who's trying to like reflect back to people what they're actually saying or what I'm hearing. And that feels just like my life's work, maybe in some way. I decided probably freshman in high school, I had a really great English teacher who handed me The Secret Life of Bees and The Great Gatsby and just started giving me books. And I became an avid reader and decided I wanted to be an English teacher. So I went to college here in Ohio at Shawnee State and studied English education. And I became a high school English teacher, middle school and high school. And that was a trip. I will also
say more about that.
Yeah, I also want to say like something else that feels significant in growing up is my parents really exposed us to a lot of other types of people and ways of life and perspectives and art. And I also just have such a deep gratitude for that. I think I've tried to do a lot of work around understanding and using my privilege. And I think my parents set me up to do that. And I feel really grateful for them because, that's hard work to do. And I think without them intentionally doing that, I wouldn't have been able to have that self-awareness to be able to start that journey. They also raised us in the evangelical Christian church, which is a whole other podcast. Maybe we can someday. I spent most of my 20s just kind of deconstructing a lot of religious trauma from that experience. And, without going down too much of a rabbit hole, that really shaped a lot of how I viewed myself in a negative way. And I've had to do so much work to undo what I learned in those spaces.
You're not the first guest who have had this experience. I do think it is significant. I think it changes a lot about how you decide what to do with the rest of your life.
Yeah.
When you have some of this internalized guilt and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had someone who was so impacted by it that everything they lived by was, well, what's going to happen when the rapture happens? And, that can be really tough.
For sure.
Tough work.
Yeah.
Or they shaped who they were to fit into that mold and it wasn't who they were at all,
exactly.
Right? Like that's the problem is that you feel like, well, especially if you are other, if you are gay or transgender or anything that doesn't fit into those molds and you just happen to be born into that indoctrination.
Yeah.
You're now surrounded by a message that you absolutely inside can't fit in any way or form and fighting desperately to try to do that. And,
for sure.
And it's during formidable years. So now you've internalized that something's wrong with me
right.
and I'm never going to fit in with all these with the narrative that I've been served.
Exactly.
It's traumatizing.
It really
It
is.
really is. Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily,
not by neglect of your parents.
no,
not because
definitely not.
You just don't know what kids need. They don't show up with a map to be like,
Nope.
not this one.
For
this
sure.
one can't go to evangelism. Like they can't go to this church.
Exactly.
This is, you're just showing them what resonated with you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not always right.
Well, and an empath too. Like,
right.
I think even from a young age, I was able, like, my body was trying to tell me, like, these things don't add up.
Yeah.
Like, what is being said, and then like oftentimes the message of shame and superiority and judgment that I took on. Even like the judgment piece, like I've had to rewire my brain and still have to catch myself from, like, it's actually the really ugly piece of me that comes up when I'm feeling insecure. We're just going to get pretty deep here for a second, which is something, like, especially in my partnership with my partner, Michael, I will catch myself, like, that's the space that I go into when I get insecure or I don't have some needs that are being met, or like when I'm struggling mentally and I'm not in the space where I'm handling it in a healthy way, I jump to like superiority and I'm like looking for people to blame and shame. And it's not my favorite part about myself. Luckily, like now I've done so much work to try to recognize that, and I can feel when it's happening, and I'll even like call it out, like, God, I'm in that space again. Like, this is what's happening. I'm blaming you, but you're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
And so, there are just so many layers because of that. Especially because I am also a really spiritual person. Like, I feel really deeply connected with spirit. And so having that really loud messaging of like what's exactly right and wrong, and that really shaped me, and I had to like unshape that and reshape myself, and which a lot of people do. I mean, I think that's like part of a lot of our spiritual journeys is like that deconstruction. And so I'm thankful that I've been able to be on that journey, and have even watched like people in my family and especially my mom, like we've kind of worked through some of that together, because she actually experienced, like, my parents went through some really hard situations with the church. And so anyway, I don't want to make this whole conversation about that, but it was a pretty significant part of how I learned how to show up in the world. And I had to do a lot of work around that. And some of it was good. Also, let me not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, there were a lot of people involved that invested in me and loved me and did a lot of good for the community. And like, I definitely want to call that what it is.
Organized religion isn't all terrible,
right?
But it's not by of itself a terrible thing. And
correct.
The problem is there's so many belief systems that it's hard to know what to put a child into, right? And adults are gravitating towards those spaces because as adults they feel called to that, know.
Well, it creates community for the family. And,
yeah, for sure.
I think when as society gets less communal and more separated, that is a quote unquote easy way to build that around your family.
And I'm so driven by community. So it was also hard for me to walk away from organized religion because of that piece of it.
Right.
But like, there was a point I got to where I was like, at kind of a strange mega church. And I was like, I had to leave the service, and I just like sat and bawled in the stall. And I'm just like, it was so incongruent with what I knew love to be, that I was like, I physically like can't do this anymore. So anyway, that got that went down a rabbit hole.
Well, this may be divine, to be honest with you. Part of our introduction to you was talking about Easter over the weekend, and we read a passage from one of our mentors that spoke about Easter.
Okay.
And the passage that we read was about parts of you that needed to die, the waiting part of it, and then the resurrection. But it's not about just some old person, Jesus, or whatever your belief is. It's really about, as humans, what we go through all the time.
Yeah.
And it's guaranteed is that parts of us change, need to die. There's a waiting period, and then we rise a different version of ourselves, right? And allowing the light to just guide you where you need to be. And that happened to you in that service, right? Yeah. And so it's not, I don't think the timing is not terrible for this conversation, because I think this becomes really hard. That's what we were talking about, is that it becomes really hard to be in family dynamics and not just let people be.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? We so want clan indoctrination. We want everyone to be like us, to feel included and the same. Yeah. And it's really hard, and especially in our own clan, to be like, I'm just going to let you be different.
Right.
And that's okay.
Exactly.
And we are so not okay with that. And that's the worst indoctrination. Yep. You don't want to disappoint your parents. This is what they believe in. I can't tell you how many women I know who are like, I'm the black sheep. I'm I'm the only non-Catholic person in my 12 sibling group, whatever that is. Like, it's hard to carry that weight and to be the person who's other, And so to push against that is really difficult. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think a lot of women, because we think about people's feelings, because we think about how we are impacting other humans way more than men do, it impacts us more. And we have it takes us longer to push away, I think, sometimes than boys would just be like, doesn't resonate with me. We did that when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like, and they will push away. But I feel like women stick that course a lot longer than maybe they should.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that is actually a great segue to the next season of my life, which was getting married way too young. It was really a cultural thing in Southern Ohio to,
by 22, 23,
sweetheart, especially in the Christian community. Like, people get married very young. That was like an expectation. And I did that. And I had no freaking clue who I was at 22. And neither did my ex-husband. And I stayed so long in a really dysfunctional marriage, married to the wrong person. Yeah. And I think it was because I was conditioned to do that and to be the good girl and to stay, and divorce brings shame to the families. Right. And like, I'm not saying anything new or groundbreaking. This is like something so many women experience, but it's interesting to me because I had a pretty public position in my town when I was going through my divorce, and it was almost like women were coming up to me, like, with this longing in their eyes. Like, I see what you're doing. How did you do it? Yeah. Like, help me. Yeah. Help me.
Yeah.
Which is, we'll get to this later. It's like part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I actually said that to some really safe women in my life, and that was the only reason I was able to get out of that situation, which is the best decision I've ever made. And
the biggest regret is staying in those things for so long and then feeling the shame and regret of the wasted time. So when someone else does it and you can see that as a mirror for yourself, it's really, really powerful.
For sure. It's like, I needed permission, and I didn't know that I'm the only person who can give myself permission. I had to learn that, and it took a really long time until finally, same thing as what I talked about earlier in that bathroom stall, my body was like, we physically, listen, bitch.
Yeah.
we're done.
We're done. We're done.
You're not going to survive.
Right.
It got to that point,
Yeah.
which is another really interesting story. It all kind of blew up during COVID, which I think is a common experience. And it was because I couldn't escape and had to like face it. But that's maybe a story for another time. How many hours do we have?
We're good. Okay. You got however many you need.
COVID is a pivotal point for almost every person's story because it forced you to slow down and to really look at your life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I had nowhere to go. I had to like face the situation I was in. And I had built a whole life of escape. And when all of that crumbled,
right,
I was like, oh shit.
What were your main escape routes? Like what did you kind of build in? I think that's what we hear a lot too, right? Is like how I escaped from reality before I had to face it.
I built an entire hub of my community and a team of 20 people and a successful business. And I think I'll tell you the story behind that. I had really great intentions of doing that, but also I think there were subconscious intentions inside of me that were like, I needed to do something so big and challenging and distracting because I couldn't exist with the truth and reality, and I needed something to distract me from that. So that was also a piece of that, which I honestly don't know if I've ever even articulated that until right now. But I know that that's part of the truth. Now, like, I've learned how to sit with discomfort and get really freaking honest with myself and sit with reality and, even with pain. And I didn't have that skill before. And so it took a long time to get there. But so let me go back. I told you, I hope you're here for like the journey because it's taken some twists and turns.
I love it. We're here for it.
So I went to school, became a middle school and high school English teacher. I loved it. I'm obsessed with just like how cool and creative and resilient and funny teenagers are. I think they have such a bad rap. And I think that like even during COVID, I would like look to the teenagers and see how they were handling it and like learn from them.
Right.
I think we have a lot to learn from teens. It's like this really like spicy, weird, awkward phase of our lives that forces us to be vulnerable and see the world in a really honest way that I think gets kind of like beat out of us as adults. And so I think that's kind of like the last like true, really special phase. So I just love teenagers.
Yeah.
I think they're great. And I think that people talk a lot of trash about teenagers. And I'm like, you guys don't even understand. Like, especially this next generation, they're facing so much and they are also just like showing up with kindness and empathy and inclusion and like staying informed. And I was not doing that when I was a teenager.
No,
I don't know about you guys.
Well, we didn't have the ability to.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
right.
I didn't know what was happening in Africa. Like, I didn't know what was happening in other countries. I didn't know what was happening in other states. You didn't even know what was happening in other cities.
Yes.
You got your city's newspaper.
Yep.
That might have a smattering of things happening around.
Yep.
But that's about it.
Yes.
And you would see the news, mostly your local news,
right.
because didn't have a whole bunch of other stuff, unless you were a fancy person with cable. You just didn't have all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't.
And they can be informed, but
right.
it can be a lot. I know as an adult, I feel overwhelmed with the informatics coming at me. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we have to structure is how do we help them navigate and filter? And maybe that'll just happen naturally over time is that their filters will change. That it feels overwhelming for me, not as much for your generation. And then definitely not the new generation coming up.
Well, I think it's to your point is they are less willing to listen to nuances about what does this mean financially or XYZ. They're like, no, what's right for people?
Right.
And so I think they're able to cut some of that a little bit more than any of our other generations, listening to our fathers talk about, what they're just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
People are dying in other countries.
Right.
People are being treated in our country. Not great.
Yeah.
So we're going to go with our guts here. And I completely agree that this generation leads directly. And if you're a person that believes in the awakening of what's happening right now, we desperately need this generation to be like, I don't care about your money or your things. People.
Yep.
I think that's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. I really respect and learn from them often, this next generation. So anyway, just shout out to
all of our teens.
All the teens. Exactly. So I loved being a teacher. Very long story short, I taught for 6 years, and I started to really notice how many of my students, which you can also think about the area that I was teaching in, under-resourced. I realized like how many students were coming in early before school, hanging in my classroom, during lunch, after school, starting to share things with me that they were struggling with. And I was like, there's a pattern here of teenagers who don't have anyone, who, when they leave this school building, know where they are, if they have dinner, let alone thinking about how to get your driver's license. Are they going to graduate? What's their future look like? None of that. There were just an overwhelming amount. And so I started with one of my best friends who was also another teacher, like researching resources in the community. And we came up really empty-handed. Like basically there were resources for younger kids, but they stopped at 8th grade. And so I'm like, all of these kids are falling through the cracks. And nobody knows, because there are teachers and coaches and people taking care of them in this school building. But when they leave this school building, nobody has their back. And so,
do you feel like that was a socioeconomic thing mostly, or
I think
that there was a large portion of maybe?
Definitely. Yeah.
People working multiple jobs or.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah.
Or just like, generational cycles of addiction.
Right.
And like, they're stuck in environments where people are struggling so much with addiction that they don't have the capacity to show up as a parent or a guardian in the way that they need to, because they also don't have the support that they need. It's just like these, it just is a cycle that has continued for generations, especially in Appalachia. And I'm not trying, I think we also get a bad rap. It's just like such a beautiful area with, I think, the best people, but under-resourced is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And under-supported, and underappreciated. So my friend and I quit teaching. We made the decision to quit teaching and start the Paper City Mentoring Project. So it's a teenage mentoring program where we train adults from the community to show up and be mentors to high school students who could use someone in their corner. And I was like, I don't love fundraising. I'm not trying to like be a fundraiser my whole life, especially in a small town where everyone's kind of already competing for all the same dollars.
Right.
So our downtown was like, had a little spark. Like when I was growing up, there was basically nothing open. It was really not a vibrant place. It was dead. And it started to have some sparks. Other women my age or just a little bit older were like starting to open businesses. And so I'm like, we really need like a very positive space in this town. And so I'm like, what if I opened a coffee shop, restaurant, bakery that could house the mentoring project? And that's where they can hang out and come to after school and have a safe space. But also it's like a space for the community, and the community gets to be a part of supporting that. And so Paper City Coffee was born. And so just to like give you an idea, I was an English education major, quitting my job to run a business. I had never run a business, start a nonprofit, never done that. I had never worked in food service. I was starting a full restaurant, bakery, full third wave coffee shop. and coffee. And I loved coffee, but like, I didn't know enough to own a coffee shop. So I just went into like full blown maniac mode of like just a boot camp of like, I'm going to figure this out. And I did. And when I say I mean we, like the whole community, Anna and I started just like telling our story and like, this is what we're doing. We believe in these teenagers. We believe that they need support. Can you show up and help us? There was a phrase that we found, be who you needed when you were younger. And that phrase, like our community latched onto like that and showed up. We did just like a social media all call for mentors. 75 people showed up.
Oh,
Wow.
And so it became this really beautiful program, and we've served hundreds, thousands actually of teenagers. Now we have school-based programming. So we're in the schools, the one-on-one mentoring still happening at the coffee shop. So this was all in 2016 when I opened Paper City Coffee and we started the mentoring project. So that was 9 years ago. And got through COVID. Also another podcast episode. Really an interesting time to own a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
That really taught me a lot, but I actually think it made us such a better business and nonprofit, honestly.
Yeah.
They're two separate entities, but, rely on each other very strongly, but really had to pivot and grow and stretch and learn. That's where I felt like I started to care a lot about how I was showing up as a leader. And, I always cared for my team, and it became such a close community for me. But that was when I became obsessed with like, how does a leader impact a community, honestly?
So Christy and my brother had a restaurant during COVID as well.
God, okay.
And, many of them, like 6, 7. And I think what people don't realize is about owning a business in a pressure cooker like COVID is, to your point, leadership and pivoting becomes the only thing that you can do.
Yep.
Because when everyone's scared, doesn't know what's happening, the only thing you can do is step into your leadership. So I would love it for maybe to hear a little bit more about like the things that you saw within yourself being into that pressure cooker. There's also that thing is the saying that's like, what are you made out of when the squeeze happens? So if you squeeze an orange juice comes out. When a person's squeezed, what they're made of really comes out. So what are those things that you liked that you saw that you were like, okay, I'm going to lean into this? And what are those things that you were like, maybe this is something popping up that I want to work on for myself?
Totally. I was also on a really deep personal growth and evolution journey myself. And, I was a pretty young leader, and still just coming into my own and finding my own voice and having the confidence to like be who I actually was and kind of shut off the performance, which took me a really long time.
You weren't even 30 yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm doing the math, and I'm like, you were under 30 at this point. Yeah. It's impressive.
So
I've taught, I quit, I've started a nonprofit, and I started a restaurant / business and entrepreneurship and all the things. You just jumped right in.
I just jumped right in, which I will be honest with you, I think is because I was really naive to what all of that would take. And I'm glad that I was, because I don't think I would have done it.
Nobody would ever do that if they knew what it took.
Exactly. Especially a restaurant.
Yeah. Nobody would ever do it if they knew.
No. So
it's just raw naivete.
Yes.
I'm going to do this.
Right. Yeah.
That energy is great.
And I feel grateful because if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you just have to have it in you to just be the most resourceful person in the room. Like, you might not be the most well experienced, you might not be the smartest, you might not be the most charismatic, but if you are the freaking scrappiest person in the room, like, you'll figure this shit out. And that's what I did. And I will also tell you that I had to really change my relationship with failure. Like, as a person who previously found a lot of my identity with, like, you know, being, I don't want to say perfect, but performing as if I had it all together and had everything figured out. And I had to throw that out the window because it was very clear from day one. Like, I absolutely do not have this figured out. I do not know what I'm doing. I'm just going to try what I think is best, and I'm going to screw that up, and I'm going to learn from that. Every day I'm going to do that 45 times. And then the next day we're going to do it a little bit better. And that's also how I learned how to show up as a leader. And I think because I was on this journey of finding compassion for myself, I think my staff started to hopefully see that journey for me. And so I think it became a pretty safe space for them also to show up and try things and get creative and fail and take ownership over the business with me. I really wanted it to be like our business. And so that took me a while to figure out. I definitely, in the beginning, I was like micromanaging, really performative to the community. And then I just slowly started to let all of that go. But it was a journey. It was not something that happened overnight. And it is something I think I will work on for the rest of my life. Let me also say, like, I'm not sitting here saying I have that figured out.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful for that business and for the young people that I brought on as my staff, because they showed up in a really authentic way and also gave me the space and the grace to like be myself, and also hold me accountable for, like, if you're going to say this is the type of business that we are, then your decisions and your behavior have to match that. And so I had some accountability from them, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
Because I think so often in businesses, leadership gets to not have that accountability. It's like the feedback loop just goes from the top down, and everyone else gets performance reviews and feedback and blah, blah, blah. And the reality is the people leading the companies don't have that accountability. And it is obvious to everyone else that what they are saying and what they are doing are not congruent.
Yep.
Which to me is a lack of integrity. Like, it's not integrated, what you're saying and what you're doing. So, like, there's a problem there. And so I started to allow myself to be open to that accountability and, like, okay, like, swallow my pride and my ego. Okay, I'm out of my integrity. Like, I say that this is the type of space we are and the type of leader I am, but like this decision or how I handled that situation doesn't back that up. So I'm going to like learn from that, apologize, whatever that looks like, and go from there.
And you asked for that feedback, and they were willing to give it.
Yeah. And I think it took us a long time to build, like, especially my managers, like, we really focused on how do we give feedback in the moment. And it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to create like psychological safety. I know that's a buzzword, but like, it's just not easy.
Right.
And I think so. It's like so many people talk about it, but actually doing that is so uncomfortable, and you have to be wrong so often that I don't think a lot of people are willing to do it.
Well, and then I've been a leader in corporate America for a long time. So from my experience, I witnessed other leaders around me saying that's what they wanted.
Yes.
I want this feedback.
Yes.
I want you to be real. I want you to be honest because I care.
Yep.
And then I would see them walk over to another peer.
Yep.
And be like, they have no idea what that, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's that, like,
or you get punished.
Totally.
Yeah.
And even if it's not intentional, there's that unconscious bias that then happens.
Yeah.
That then you're starting to have less patience, or it's a very, I'm glad to hear you say it's a long process.
Totally.
Because I think people want to fix culture and fix how things happen, and they want it to happen fast.
No.
It's like you have to earn
Yes.
trust like you earn anything else.
Absolutely.
And as a leader, you have to be willing to sit with it, listen to it, and not try to solve and just say, what am I doing that I can reflect back to them that I'm going to change, or I will do what I say. I think the tree of trust was something I used to teach new leaders, and the roots are your integrity.
Yep.
And if the roots are rotten, nothing else matters.
Absolutely.
Because at the top of that tree, those leaves are results.
Yep.
But people want results without realizing the roots of integrity are what makes the whole plant.
Yeah, it takes so long to build that. That's why it's like I do leadership development, like I facilitate classes and stuff. And something we try to reiterate is like, you buckle yourself in because you're on a journey. This is not like you're going to be a great leader tomorrow. And the other piece I want to say is like, I heard a speaker, Miles Adcock, speak one time who said, if you want to be a better leader, become a better person. Like, that's what you actually need to focus on. The more I was willing to get uncomfortable with myself and deal with my own bullshit and take responsibility for myself, the better leader I was becoming. It's just like, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Like, oftentimes people are looking for quick fixes or an equation, or like, it just doesn't work like that. At least not in my experience. During COVID, I was also like started the process of divorce, which was really a dark time for me personally. And it took a lot of work to be able to make that happen. So I also soon after that decided to open a cocktail bar called The Page. So when the coffee shop shut down, it opened up as like live music, cocktail bar, just also looking for more ways to escape my life. In some ways, I'm sure. I had a lot on my plate. And I decided to start a master's program at the University of Texas, which required me to fly to Austin, Texas for 10 days every 2 months for 2 years.
Wow.
Holy cow.
Might as well just throw something else on,
Obviously, why not? And it's because I became obsessed with I thought we had this like really cool incubator that I'm not even going to take responsibility for. It was us as a team. We were figuring out how to like make work a place where people could be themselves and also like be held accountable and get better and grow and learn. And also like think about how your work impacts everyone around you. I became really obsessed with that. I've always been obsessed with people, but like being able to manage people and like have a team made me like get super niche obsessed with like leadership and like, how do you actually lead a team effectively and be a real human? Because I hadn't really seen that done. I hadn't had that modeled for me really.
Right.
But I'm like, can you do it? I'm trying to do it, but I'm failing a lot. So I don't know. Is it even possible? So I found this program at the University of Texas called Human Dimensions of Organizations. And I was like, boom. Yeah. Like, same as this podcast. Like, these are my people. Yeah. And so I started that program, graduated with that master's degree, developed a really beautiful community of people in my cohort in Austin who I still am deeply connected to, who also are on this journey of like leadership. There has to be a way for us to do this in a more human way. There has to be. And that's what we studied for 2 years. And it was an incredible experience and a lot of work. But I'm so grateful that I did it. And that kind of led me on the journey of like, what do you want to do with this next? And about 2023, I started to be like, first of all, I'm I've been ready since I was a kid to live somewhere else. I love this place. And also I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Especially after like
The
small
divorce.
town, the divorce, like being the face of that business and always being there and talking to everyone. Like it was kind
Caged
of
animal.
and like the balls on these people who would
Yeah,
be who
yeah.
didn't know me, but
Yeah.
like, you know, in a weird way, they feel like they know you just
Mhm.
because they come to your shop. Who would be like, well, why are you getting a divorce? And I'm like, what?
I don't know you.
Right. Like, this is not appropriate.
Yeah.
Social
Anyway,
media has made everyone believe that everything is their business. And it
that
just is
is
not.
true.
It's just not.
not.
It's not your business.
Right. It's really wild. So anyway, it was just time. And so I finished that master's degree and I was ready to sell the coffee shop. But I wasn't going to do it until I could find someone that I was like, you know, it's a really beautiful, inclusive, unique space in Southern Ohio that's a bright spot for teenagers, but also for a lot of, I think, people who didn't feel like they belonged anywhere else in Southern Ohio. And so I feel so grateful to be a part of building something like that. And it built me just as much as I helped build it. I will say that. So long story short, ended up 2 of my former students and their husbands bought the coffee shop last May 1st, so almost a year.
That's awesome.
Pretty full circle.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job. They're learning a lot. And I did tell them, I was like, if you're open to it, this place will change you. Like, you will not be the same people. If you want that, like, you have to choose that and you really have to lean in. And I think that they are. And I think they're learning a lot. I'm still on the board of the nonprofit and still really connected with my teen who just graduated. So still involved in that way, but that has been a journey for me because I overnight walked away from my community that I was so deeply ingrained in and moved to a city where I don't really know anyone. I have a partner named Michael who's incredible, and now his community has kind of accepted me in, which is beautiful, and his family. And so I'm meeting a lot of people in Columbus, but there was a grief period for me where I just like overnight, like I felt like I gave my child up. Honestly, like there was like some deep grief that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
So I'm working on building community here, and that's part of my journey now. And now I'm coaching. So
how'd you get into that? So where did that come about? Or after doing all this, you thought, yes, it is time for me to disperse this knowledge.
Yeah. I think I actually tried to avoid coaching for a long time because I don't like the word coach, which is a funny reason to avoid something. But it's just the truth. Like, it kind of gives me the ick. Yeah. Like, you know, I think there are just people on the internet who are like coaching people, and it feels really disconnected, and it feels really like they're almost taking advantage. And I just didn't want to be encompassed into that world or kind of share that label. And so I just avoided it. So I've been working with a consulting firm out of Austin and flying to Silicon Valley or on Zoom. And I've been working with software engineers, executives, school districts, like all types of leaders in a lot of different spaces, the tech world, working with them on how to show up and have compassion for the people that they're leading, have compassion for themselves, like really show up as a leader in the way that they want to show up. And that has been a really incredible experience to be, because it still allows me to teach. I love to teach, right? But it also kind of allows me to play in that space of leadership and what that really looks like. And kind of like because I don't work for these corporations, I can push the conversations a little bit in ways that they probably can't,
Nice.
which I
Totally.
love to do.
Yes.
I'm like, let's talk
Yes.
about what's really going on here.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing
Yes.
here is
What everyone's not saying
right.
is, which is like, honestly, like, I thought for a while, I'm going to make the jump into the corporate world. I've been a teacher and I've run my own restaurant. I've never like felt like I have made the money that matches the impact of my work. So like maybe I could explore what that feels like.
Right.
And the more exposure I got to the corporate world,
No.
I was like, this, you have to be so performative
Yes.
in most of these spaces. And I'm like walking into these spaces, and because of how in tune I can get with people, I'm like, nobody in this room is actually saying what they mean or talking about what's really going on here.
Corporate speak is a real ass thing.
It's wild, man.
Mhm.
I've never been a part of it. And so like being exposed to that, I'm like, this is insane. And I even interviewed for a couple like big girl, big title jobs. And I could tell I got all the way to the end. I could tell I was making them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I was too human in the way I was showing up, which is not actually something I'm willing to sacrifice anymore. And so I'm like,
You're like, I work too hard to connect to self. I'm not going to let it go now.
I'm just not going to.
Yeah.
I'm not, your company is not worth that to me. I have a lot to offer you if you are willing for me to show up in this way.
Right.
Well, I think that's really interesting that you've had the perspective that you've had. I worked at a massive company, and their number one thing, they won like Forbes best training program and all these things. It was so interesting. We would have outside companies come in, probably very similar to yours,
Yeah.
and we would go through leadership training.
Mm.
And I would take like so many notes, I had
Yeah.
notebooks full of things. I'm like drawing the tree of trust in my house.
Yes.
I'm like, this is
On your
everything
wall.
to me. I'm like, I love this. And then so I come in a week later into a staff meeting with everyone around this huge table in a boardroom. Like, these are all my ideas. They're like, no. I'm like, wait, do we spend $500,000 on this training? Well, I want to do all of those things. So like, let's slow roll this, right? Like, so it's just really interesting because they desperately would want to bring in these programs to be better leaders. All of mine was leadership training because I knew early I wanted to be in leadership, and I was like, I will eat all of this up.
Yes.
And then the more I got in my career there, I was like, this is actually insanity that they are hiring and spending,
But they check the
performative
box.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, see that checklist that they brought? You can use that checklist in your coachings with your employees.
But that's exactly what you're talking is discongruent, right? It's like what you're telling them is important and what you're providing for them and you say is important, and then what you actually allow to execute are not the same.
No.
Yeah.
And so it just it then they're like, well, that's not real. Nothing's real. We have to keep performing because nothing's really real. Everything is just disingenuine.
Yes.
Or there's no dollars attached to it. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is productivity and doing what I say.
Yep.
Dollar.
Right.
So really, without that dollar attached, I don't care.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't.
And I don't.
But the bottom line is if you implement these things and you are becoming integrous, and you do have employees that are able to be more their authentic self, leads to longevity and happiness in their role and more productivity. Like, these things are connected. You feel like they're not.
100%.
It's hysterical to me that they don't see that.
Like,
very few
companies can like you saying it. We're like, obviously, right?
Obviously.
But then you have these doofus McGee's sitting in the boardroom saying, no. Or our board won't like this. Our board won't like this. Profit. How are we going to make the sales team better? You know what I mean? So it's so silly.
Yeah.
Right.
Are you noticing that in the people that are hiring you and people that are wanting to work to really get better? Or my question is really, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Are we starting to see a new generation of companies that are hiring people like you to really not only have the training to say they had it and check it off a box, but to truly implement what you're saying to create a space that's better for everyone?
I will tell you this. I work with some companies that are similar to your experience in that it's just checking off a box. Now, I do think that some of the leaders in that space are able to implement a lot of that on their teams and make their, what they actually personally touch better as much as they can, which feels empowering to them.
Right.
But as a whole, because there isn't an instant or visibly connected profit, those changes are not happening on a deep level. I will tell you, there is one organization that I have worked with consistently over the last year that probably has 2,300 employees. It's a smaller organization. I'm not going to say what it is, but they are working in the education space. The superintendent gets it. And because of that, the whole organization is changing. It is becoming a more human space.
Yeah.
And because of that, all of the kids that they're serving are receiving better services, and their turnover rate is so low. And because it's becoming a really healthy workspace.
Right.
Because it's being bought in from the top down.
Yeah.
Like this dude, and it's a guy, I will say.
Nice.
He gets it. And he's so freaking committed, and he's willing to make hard decisions to back this up.
Yeah, that's so key.
It's so key, and it's so beautiful to see. Yeah, because awesome. I know even on a small team of 20 people, how hard it is to actually stay committed to it.
But I want to say too, the work that you're doing is incredible. And even if a company doesn't change, I can name 3 to 4 people who were instructors in those classes that changed me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I
love
still
that.
have friendships. My problem was I always wanted to help so much that most of my good friends outside of college were my employees at one point.
Yep.
But I cared so fucking much about them and their success and their happiness.
Yeah.
That they're still in my life today.
I love that.
And so just know that even if a company doesn't change, those people changed me. Yeah. And I hopefully made a ripple effect of people who felt better at work every single day. So no matter what, it's making a huge difference.
Yeah.
Great.
Just to hear that as a leader, to hear someone tell you, you can be this way when you feel like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
To hear, no, this is the right way, changes brain chemistry. Totally.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think there's 2 more things I want to say about the work I'm doing now, which I'm still part-time doing that consulting work with the firm out of Austin, but have also launched my own personal coaching business, which is what I really resisted for a while. Just because, it's like, what the heck is a life coach? So even calling myself a life coach, right now I'm saying I'm a leadership and life coach. I'm working with my clientele is right now and probably always female leaders who attorneys, realtors, small business owners, people who are in a leadership position in the corporate world who are really struggling, people who want to show up as better leaders, and also are on a really committed journey of evolution in their own personal life. So they have a lot on their plate because they're really trying to get in alignment with how they're showing up personally and professionally. That seems to be what I have attracted so far, which makes sense, with my own journey. Yeah. And it's interesting because when I was thinking I might jump into the corporate world, which who knows, maybe someday I will. I have no idea what that looks like. I've learned to never say never because nothing in my life right now, city, career, relationship, friends, almost every single thing is completely different than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
My life nothing in my life looks the same. House, nothing. Community, it's like so crazy. So I'm kind of done trying to predict where I'll be in the future, but I am not going to name this company, but it's a super cool company that has the corporate offices here in Columbus, founded by a woman, does really creative, cool, incredible things. And also I really respect how they seem to treat their employees in their workplace and how they protect that. So I'm like, how do I get in that situation?
Yeah.
So I like sent snail mail. I like did this right?
That's awesome.
I like went to the paper store and found this like really wacky paper and like sent this letter that I typed up like a typewriter. I was just being weird. And I'm like, I don't know. They're not going to respond to an email. So I found the name of, actually, I was here for a meeting for a community event and met the chief people officer. So I knew her name and I mailed her this letter and my resume and was just like, hey, I know this is weird, but this is me. And I just finished this master's degree and I'm obsessed with people. And I'd love to hear your story and how you lead this company because I have a lot of respect for it. And she emailed me right away and was like, come to our office. I'll give you a tour. We'll sit down and I'll like tell you my story. And I'm like, hell yeah. So I show up at this office. She gives me a tour. I'm like fangirling over all of this stuff.
Swoon.
Right. And she takes me into her office and we sit on comfy chairs, not at her desk. And she closes the door. And I'm just like, asking her some questions and just listening. And within 5 minutes, she was crying and she was like, I'm really sorry, but I just had to let somebody go. And like, I love this job, but this job is so hard. And like, I can't fall apart out there.
Right.
And she's like, I don't know who you are, but like, I can't keep it together. And you feel like a person that is not going to judge me. And so I just tried to give her space to process. Like, I know what it feels like to have to let somebody go and the humanity that you're dealing with in that moment. And you can't, in a corporate space like that, the expectation is for you to like keep your face on and just deal with the next thing and move on.
Always have it together.
And always have it together. Even as the chief people officer. And so in that moment, I was like, this is crazy. Like, these people who are in charge of showing up and supporting all of these other people, they don't have anyone who is allowing them to process the emotional and mental labor that it takes to be an actual human, compassionate leader. They don't have anyone. And I didn't either a lot of times. And I struggled with that. There was this closet, super sketchy, in my coffee shop. It's in an old like 1800s beautiful building. Super sketchy closet behind the coffee bar. Do you remember in the movie Matilda?
Mm-hmm.
Principal Trunchbull, the freaking chokey.
Yep.
So glad you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
The chokey, it's the sketchy ass closet that she would shove these kids in. Dark, scary. We called that closet the chokey. If I could tell you how many times I cried in the chokey, and all of my employees, we would just say,
you
like,
have to find a cry room.
do you need to cry in the chokey? And
take it to the chokey.
Take it to the chokey.
Yeah.
So
have a minute.
Yeah. So like that interaction with that chief people officer really spurred me to say like, okay, what if you became the type of coach that could allow people to process the deep human work and emotions that it requires if you really want to be an effective leader? What
A
if you could
conscious
do
leader,
that?
right? A
Conscious leader.
Yeah.
And so I was like,
Because
okay.
even just being a leader in general, I will say, as restaurateurs, there's nobody except for
No.
maybe your spouse or your partner that you're going to come home to and vent to. And after
No.
a while, they're like, listen,
It's overwhelming.
I'm a doorstop at this point.
Yes.
Like, you're just dumping on me every day, right? Like,
Correct.
same. Like, there's just no support
Mhm.
when you are an entrepreneur, or you are in that upper space.
Yep.
That who do you go to?
Yep.
Who supports you, right?
Yes.
Your burnout is so in
Mhm.
depth because all you do is support other people all day. All
Yep.
you do is use your brain instead of theirs
Yep.
to problem solve. All you do is take on all their personal
Yes.
struggles,
Yep.
traumas, things that are happening in their life. So and so is arrested. This person's got a drug
Yes.
problem. Right? Like, it is so much
It's so much.
every day.
Yep.
And it's not, oh, you have a bad week and then it's gravy. No, it's every day
Yeah.
somebody has an issue as a leader
Right.
in your employee group.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
And the bigger you are, the worse that is. Right?
Totally.
And to be a conscious, effective person and a human who cares deeply about people, you want to help them. You want to be that person to them. You want to do that. And I think over the years, it gets increasingly difficult to stay conscious, to
For sure.
stay sympathetic, to stay empathetic, to say all of those things, because you're like, more of this today.
Yeah.
Right. Like, there's not a good, it would be great to have an outlet of somebody to talk to. And I don't think leaders do that. They were like,
well, they get judged too. Even if they do have
Yep.
quote unquote someone within the organization they can talk to.
Mhm.
I'll never forget leading my little heart out and then going to a performance review and someone telling me, well, we would give you a better rating, but you have a hard time having hard conversations. I remember that to this day. I think about it all the time, because what they were saying is, you're emotional.
Yeah.
And when you have to let someone go, we've seen you cry.
Wow.
Not to that person I was letting go,
Sure.
but I would come into their office afterwards. Emotional, needing to let go of some of that. And instead of saying, I don't know, anything else, they said, you have a hard time having hard conversations.
Wow.
I think that's such a...
No, women are emotional beings, and we
Mhm.
have emotions about
Yes.
this, and emotions come out in a lot of different ways. Some days I might want to scream.
Right.
Some days I might want to cry.
Yeah.
Because I was really sad that I had to let this person go, because personally I like them. They just weren't doing the proper job here.
And it's like
there's so much emotion involved in it.
Yeah. And it's this weird thing of like the stigma around being a people leader, which is in the name, about caring about people. And so you either go to your spouse or your friends who end up not wanting to hear it anymore, right? They're like, hey, sorry, find a new job. Or you go to a trusted colleague and that ends up bad for you.
Yep. Totally.
It's a hard space to find somebody. And if you go to an entrepreneur and say, I think you should go see Megan as a therapist, really, because you need somebody who can give you space to process these emotions that you're having, to process this, and also self-exploration in that, right? The things that we allow to attach to us are usually something that we need to work through, right?
Yeah.
It's something that we are struggling with.
Yeah.
And why do I keep having the same employee?
Right.
Why do you keep hiring that same employee?
Exactly.
Like,
it sounds like a you problem.
There's so much attached to it that you have to work through, that I think that would be hugely beneficial. What you bring to the table is that processing piece of, and I'm sitting here thinking about my husband and how much he could really benefit from that as a leader in a multi-restaurant chain, as the kind of people, how you train, how you show up for people, the employees that you bring on, and how, what patterns are you in that are not serving you,
right?
That you can change as a leader if you really look at it that's a slowing down period that I think most entrepreneurs, as you probably recognize in that time, are so type A.
Yeah.
And they've got so much on their plate and feel overwhelmed with it most of the time, that adding one more thing onto their to-do list, which would probably be the most beneficial thing they could probably do for themselves, is like the hardest thing that they can wrap their heads around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It requires a slowing down, and you have to get to the point where you're willing to do that, and where you're willing to take responsibility for your part
Right.
in like what's causing you stress or what you're struggling with, or because that's really what you can control.
Right.
And so I'm working a lot with my clients on recognizing those patterns, those unconscious biases that we all have.
Right.
And also like meeting them with self-compassion, but breaking patterns that aren't serving us.
Yep.
And it's so cool to see these women being able to break those patterns. And like every time they do that, they're like taking more ownership over their lives and over the situations that they're in, and how they're showing up as leaders. And it's so beautiful to watch, because I'm not sitting here saying anything new on this podcast that you two or the audience hasn't heard before, but it's the act of, first of all, having a regulated enough nervous system to be able to process all of these things, having the space to do that in, and then taking that information, because it's all good data and information. All of your emotions you're feeling, all of the situations you're in, that's data for you. So like basically my job is to come in, read between the lines of what you're really saying, and also take that data and say like, okay, what is this information telling us about what you need, about what boundaries you need to set, about the type of person that you want to be, but this pattern keeps holding you back from that. And how do I give you support in breaking those or replacing them with new patterns?
And if someone's like listening to this and like, yes,
yeah,
I need this. Are you accepting new clients right now? Where
I
can they
am.
find you to get that started?
If you just go to Megan.gerber.com, you can also follow me on Instagram, Megan.gerber. That's like, I use it's just a more personal space than like LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Megan Gerber. I have a link tree, which I think you're going to post.
Yep.
You can just go to any of that. You can sign up for my email newsletter. I just send one a month. And what I always say to people is like, the last thing I'm here to do is add to any noise. So if you engage with me in any way, online or in person, and you don't feel more grounded, you don't learn something about yourself, or you feel like it's just more noise, I'm not the right coach for you.
Yeah.
And you can use that for any coach or therapist or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm looking to work with the right clients who are ready to do this type of work. And so far those are the people who have found me, because I think that's just how the universe works. But yeah, you can find me online, and I'm also really open to working with women who are like in a situation that they feel stuck in, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
I needed someone in that space, and I know what that feels like. And so being able to offer that support feels really organic to me.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we link all of that. I think almost every woman listening can relate to needing that and feeling stuck, and seasons of change are hard.
They're so hard. And they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Totally.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we just stay stuck because we are scared, or because we're not willing to put in the work of staying uncomfortable.
But in the spirit of Easter and resurrection,
that's right.
Change is inevitable. And we will rise as better versions of ourselves.
I love that.
And I love that.
Thank you for bringing that full circle.
Women that's inspired you. Want to give a shout out to anyone?
I mean, just the generations of women that have come before me. And I have a lot of women in my life who show up and who are creative and who are constantly evolving. Like my friend Teresa in Austin, She has 3 grown children. She was a chemical engineer. She is in her mid-50s. And she just decided that she wants to be a DJ. And so she...
So does DJ Rowdy Riley over here.
That's my dream.
Wants to be a
Listen,
DJ.
I'm going to hook you up with DJ Tea Time. Is
Yeah.
her name.
Yeah, love it.
She's like 5 foot tall, just like the smartest lady. And she gets behind, what's that called?
Turntable.
Her turntables.
Yeah.
Wow. And she's such a badass. And it was uncomfortable for her to admit, I want to be a DJ. I want to do this with my life. And here she is, and she is freaking killing it.
I love that.
So, like, I'm going to give her a shout out just because she's on my mind. But
Yeah.
every woman, it would be another podcast, who has showed up in my life and given me space to be myself. That's who inspires me.
Love that.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was so much fun. We
Yeah.
Yes, and we can have you back anytime.
Okay.
I think we could probably continue talking to you for another 4 hours. I feel like we could just grab a drink and more tea and just sit here and chat for all day. So yeah,
well,
that's the beautiful thing about this.
We will make sure people know where to find you. I feel like what you're doing is incredible.
Thank you.
You can find this podcast on iHeart, Spotify, YouTube video and audio, and then also on Apple Podcasts.
Yep. And if this resonated with you guys, or you think it would resonate with any of your friends or family, please share. Until next time.
Yep. Love you.